Anantarupini Ananta Gunavati Ananta Name Girijema Anantarupini Ananta Gunavati Ananta Name Girijema Shiva Hrinmohini Vishvavilashini Ramakrishna Jaya Daini Ma Shiva Hrinmohini Vishvavilashini Ramakrishna Jaya Daini Ma.
The Divine Mother, born of the eternal mountains, is beyond the power of the universe she created. Her many names and forms without number are all full of auspiciousness. The great Lord Shiva has become thoroughly enchanted by the Divine Mother, who gives existence to all things in the universe.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvo Vahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvisho Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, or with what we study. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. In this, the second half of our third class on Shakta Advaita Vada, we are delving into the mysteries of divine reality as seen in the Shakta path, or the path of Divine Mother of the Universe, using this chart on my right, your left, as the main ground for her many atmospheres, for her many blissful principles and axioms and truth sayings and dharma, all spread there on a vast tapestry for the aspiring aspirant to delve into, just there for the taking, really, like gems at the bottom of the floor. But as we were saying in the first half, we have to make that deep dive, take that deep breath, make that one deep dive and penetrate the surface. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that the young child can never do a deep dive, doesn't know how to tuck and dive to break the surface of the water, so can't go underneath. So once you need to learn two things: how to do that tuck and dive and pierce, penetrate the surface of the water, and after taking a deep breath. So in spiritual life, it forms a fitting analogy that many people stay sort of on the surface of the teachings. You could call the surface of the teachings aparavidya, that is the lesser knowledge of sciences and mathematics and arts and crafts and things. Or you could also call it morality and ethics, sort of religious life, mundane, conventional religious life sometimes. But when you talk about spiritual life, you're really starting out with the Dharma. It's a very good word in both Hinduism and Buddhism, and Vedanta and Yoga use that word Dharma. So it's even coming into play in Dharma Mega Samadhi here as we begin to look at this 7 steps to the attainment of Kaivalya. So penetrating the surface then of Maya, or of appearances, if you want to put it in a more sort of hands-on way, we begin to gather up these jewels of Dharma that are there at the bottom of our dive and make them our own. Realize actually that they are really part and parcel of our own eternal knowledge, our own eternal wisdom. So that beings like Kaivalya, like Patanjali, whose teachings we're studying here, the first law of yoga really is all knowledge lies within you. So you have to start with that, or upon that premise, and begin to seek then. Seek and you shall find really means that, like Ecclesiastes said, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything has been wrought before. Everything that's been done earlier. So the wise being from savant to sage to seer to savior all knows this eternal wisdom is always existing within us, and we just need it perked or pricked by, in each lifetime maybe, by a wisdom teacher or a wisdom tradition. And if you're bound to just a faith tradition, and the faith tradition has begun to be founded only on mere belief, then that's where the wisdom tradition can particularly come in to save you and give you aqualung, as it were, to make this deep dive. You'll be able to dive deeper and have a greater capacity for drinking in this amrita, this nectar. One of these words that are here. We'll look into these things. And so the teaching of Kaivalya in yoga is a very high teaching. So I'm already asking you to be at a very deep depth of wisdom when I even introduce you to it. But we are starting Advaitically, Shakta Advaita Vada at the top with Brahman, Atman, Om and Hrim. And we're beginning to work our ways to the side and down. So, because that's the way really how Ramakrishna said, my most mature opinion in the matter. And so he sort of summated everything in the Gospel of Ramakrishna at one point, is that the soul starts at the Nitya, descends to the Lila, and then returns to the Nitya. So Nitya means eternal, Lila means sportive play. So the soul starts off as no soul at all, no division, or starts off as the soul, the all-pervasive consciousness, without any divisions. And then it takes on a form, comes through the word, and begins to come down. You can explain this all cosmologically, and I have many times with many charts. 261 to date. I finally found out the number today of my own charts. So you can explain it cosmologically, but as you come out into the word and consciousness begins to take on a form, then it's supposed to be engaged in what's called lila, or sportive play. So from the Nitya to the lila and back to the Nitya, that was Ramakrishna's most mature attitude. So I often put that together with his saying that, from the crown chakra to the third eye, to the throat, to the heart, these are all, metaphoric positions on the human form that connotate or in a correlation with spheres of consciousness that are very, very indrawn and begin to become more outward. So he would say, if the Nitya for him would be the crown chakra, and the Lila for him would be down as far as the heart, but it would not encompass the navel, sexual organs, and the base of the spine, food and its digestion and all that. He said he would never come down that far. He said it only would come down to the heart, and from there give out the teachings in both directions. He'd give out the teachings to the gods and goddesses and the beings in the inner spheres who are taking teachings from great souls like him, avatars, but he would also emanate the teachings down into the lower spheres and right on down to earth. And he would even send his beloved son, Vivekananda, his spiritual son, right down into the materialism of the West to try and convince us of the spiritual nature of things, so that we could free ourselves from the problems that we're creating, the havoc we're creating, the violence we're creating, the karmas we're creating, and have a path to light in each age. From age to age, I embody myself forth to resurrect the Dharma and to destroy the old Dharma, as Krishna says in the Gita. So I'm asking you to start at a rather high level because that's your nature at a very high level. Consciousness is non-dual. Consciousness is formless. And we just have gotten so far away from thinking of it as that, and even further away from knowing it as that. So knowledge, knowing, you get the connection. We get reminded of our true nature by the teachings of the Dharma, just like we get reminded of the consistency of objects from quantum physics. So each has its own sphere and is to be looked at like facets of a diamond in its own sphere. And then you become well-rounded. Then later you can decide for yourself what's real and what's not real, if they're a god, if they're not a god, or if you want to even call it God or not. You'll know about the reality of things instead of just relativity. Or you'll come to know a little bit about people suffer in reality instead of just being in in relativity instead of just being in reality. The seers will come down into form so that they can see how people are suffering and they can lead them out. Vivekananda said that. It may be, he said, I'll be very free once I get out of my body, but I will never stop returning. I will take on 1,000 births if I can only help one person out of suffering. So that kind of vow they will take. And that's even almost beyond a bodhisattva vow. That's the vow of a nitya siddha, an eternally perfect soul who doesn't need to go through stages of bodhisattvahood, has already reached a perfection, and yet is sacrificing that moksha and coming down through Kaivalya back into form so that it can convince you of your true nature and help you free yourself. That is, he's not going to do it for you. He's an exemplar, not a savior. He's going to tell you the truth, and you have to realize it for yourself. And then you will become realized in your own right. That's moksha. See? It's not salvation. It's moksha. It's different. Liberation is different than salvation, just like mind is different from brain. So these distinctions are very helpful. Dharma is different from morality. The teachings of the Dharma start where morality leaves off. See, so these are very important distinctions to make, and they are the deeper dives that we're talking about here in this metaphor. So, with that said, let's look into one of these deepest of all philosophical dives is the principle of Kaivalya. Now, I already told you that it means isolation, specifically from nature, because nature is where all form is birthed. Because you have basically mind and Maya and all these other things involved in the equation to get form, senses and material and so forth. But that's nature. Pretty much the idea of nature in Vedanta stretches from unmanifested nature all the way out to manifested nature. Unmanifested nature is the bulk of the iceberg under the surface of things, and then manifested nature is the tip of the iceberg that we see, taste, touch, hear, and smell. So there's so much under the surface that we don't see. And that's what's under the surface is a good analogy for unmanifested nature, everything that is not yet, everything that's held in abeyance and is in potential, but is not yet manifest itself. That's the cycle that Buddha wanted out of, and other beings saw, is everything's going from form to formlessness and back again. But the iceberg is held in a huge ocean, isn't it? And that's real formlessness there. It's being formed of ice that's solidifying and melting with this under the sunlight of awareness and Gyanam, melts it and it reforms again. But it's all happening inside this huge ocean of formlessness with a capital F, if you want to call it that. So it's that formlessness that's beyond nature. Tip of the iceberg, form with a small f. Bulk of the iceberg, formlessness with a small f. The ocean in which the iceberg is held, formlessness with a capital F, if you want to put it very simply, you see. So Kaivalya then would be getting off the iceberg. You're getting out of the cycle of being born again and again in form, and then taking a trip into formlessness bereft of your consciousness, and then coming back into form bereft of your consciousness, you see. Go back, how samskaras are formed and so forth, and how we get trapped in form, so that we don't, pretty soon we don't even know our formless nature. We don't even know what deep sleep is, and we go into it every night. We don't know what samadhi is, yet the seers that attend us by the dozens, by the hundreds every age, they know, and they tell us, but yet we can't find our way there, or we can't generate an interest. I call that apathy. So this Kaivalya then is a very high echelon of realization that's going to be necessary in order for, according to Patanjali, in order for the soul to experience a sampragyata samadhi, which Vedanta calls nirvikalpa. Asampragyata and nirvikalpa, the same thing. One's a Vedantic term, one's a yogic term. And the samadhis with form are called savikalpa and sampragyata. Now, asampragyata means seedless. Sampragyata means with seeds. So you can see that pretty much form and formlessness is what they mean. Nirvikalpa means no kalpas, no time, no passage of time. Time is made extinct. You're beyond imaginations in time. And savikalpa means with imaginations in time, with conceptions in time, with fantasies in time. So you can see that one goes formless, mind stops thinking, no conceptions, no fantasies, no desires, no play, no sport. It's Advaita, and it's at its best. And then consciousness comes back out and sports and plays and gets itself involved with nature on all levels, from the kingdoms of heaven on out to earth. And that's called with form, with gunas, saguna. So this is why both these pillars on either side are so important to a more comprehensive view of truth in Vedanta, of God, of Brahman, of moksha and mukti, or Kaivalya. All of these words are very precious in terms of the states of consciousness in which the soul can find itself in any given lifetime, especially based on practice. Practice is kind of the cutting edge. Sadhana, we call it. Doing your yoga, your yogas. So, probably explaining it really nice if we say Vedavyas, the father of Vedanta, commenting on the father of yoga's system. Isn't that beautiful? So here we have Vedavyas, our own Vedantic father, saying, through union of the two principles of nature and soul comes the observation of their fundamental difference, resulting in realization of one's true essence. Stop right there. Say no more, say no more. See, that's enough right there. Through union of the two principles of nature and soul comes the observation of their fundamental difference. Hand me the... She's already headed towards it. Water and oil do not mix. Well, they look like they don't mix, but if you shake it, and we do this with the kids all the time, and you watch it for about 45 seconds, and make sure that's not 45 lifetimes to help you understand this fact, then you'll see that it's beginning to separate, you see, and nature and soul do not mix. That's kind of the teaching. So, not kind of, that is the teaching. It's the bit of hard pill that we have to swallow. But the amrita, the nectar at the end of the whole process is that you find yourself to be one with the bliss of the self. That bliss is only unalloyed and uninterrupted when it's formless. Have you noticed? Have you had uninterrupted, unalloyed bliss while you're in form? Has any soul been able to escape the suffering of death or the transformation of growth and birth? Everyone suffers under that regime. That's why the first noble truth of Buddhism is there is suffering. That's why Holy Mother told us the suffering of this world has gotten into the very marrow of my bones. And she can't see why, people go on suffering in it. She says, even sometimes the illumined souls go on rotting away in the body. I don't understand why they do that. See, her idea would be just to give it up. See, and you have to have some wherewithal to get out of the body consciously. You can't just give it up. We're not talking about suicide here. We're talking about a conscious departure from the body when the body is no longer of use to you. Old age, disease set in. See, so basically, Kaivalya is depicted very well in that little experiment of oil and water. And nature and soul have a relationship. They mix themselves up. But it's not always a very healthy, it's quite often an unholy mixture. You might have noticed by looking out in the world how many people are suffering in this thing we call nature, form. Birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death all take place in nature, Krishna says, but they do not take place in your soul. Your soul is never born, it never grows, it never expands, it never contracts, it never gets disease, and it never dies. Do I have to sing it? Because we sing that almost every time too when we sit down here. Na mrityur na shanka, na me jati beda, pita naiva me naiva, mata marjanmaha. Na mrityur, I have no death. Why? Because I never had a birth. Na me jati beda. Pita naiva, I have no father. Pita. Mata majanmaha, mata, I have no mother. Chidananda rupaha, shivoham, shivoham. And you might as well end with the primal word, Om, to put an exclamation point on this truth statement of Shankara. That's Shankara's 5th verse to the 6 verses on Nirvana. Somebody wrote a song on Nirvana, see. Their lyrics are much more profound than our radio, songs you hear on radio in the West, you see. They're singing about divine reality, either from the standpoint of lover and beloved, devotion and bhakti, and how much I love God, and how He's my heart, soul, and how I'm attracted there, and so forth. Or they're singing from the standpoint of this non-dual wisdom, like this. Na me, na, not, no, no, I'm none of that. I'm none of that. I'm not even lover and beloved. There is no distinction between me and divine reality, so how can there be a lover and a beloved? There's just oneness, and I love that. I love myself. Vivekananda said, I'm a Vedantist. I hardly found any other form of God anywhere than my own self. That's the way I started off the Sri Swami Vivekananda Vijnana Gita, the book of collected letters I put together into a song. I'm a Vedantist. I hardly find any other form of God anywhere than my own self. See? So he's not looking outside. He's looking inside for that truth of the soul. The indivisible soul, by the way. The birthless, deathless soul, by the way. So in order for a being to realize that, then isn't he going to have to reach a strata called Kaivalya, where he can actually knowingly and consciously separate himself out from form, from taking a birth, because that's where your form is incepted, in the fetus, right? Or from, if you're not taking a birth, then you're not going to have to separate yourself from anything at the time of death. And that's a jati vada right there, attached to this inner pillar. The path, Vada, of those who know that they're ajati, unborn. They know that they're never born and they never die, even when they come into a body. And that's Jivan Mukta. See, we had that a couple nights ago at our musical discourse. We had that teaching of Jivan Mukta, living liberated soul. Very powerful teaching in Vedanta. So, with truth sentiments like that, even put to music again, poetry and music, in order to entice the soul, invite the soul into this periphery of the Dharma, and just to immerse yourself in it. The glad tidings of truth teachings, you see. It's Christmas every day. And you're warmed constantly by this flow of teachings in your mind. You hardly know what the numbness of ignorance is. There's too much warmth flowing in you. So, I didn't get past one sentence, you see. Through union of the two principles of nature and soul comes observation of their fundamental difference. You can just use that as a mantra. But it results in realization of one's true essence. This process takes place when the Purusha, the indweller in the city of 9 gates, abandons its relationship with matter and mixes itself no more with nature. No more. See, I will not mix anymore. I will not shake it up, baby. I will not shake my booty. I will realize my buddhi. This is called Kaivalya, final isolation from the endless stream of phenomena caused by mind and intellect. Aha. Vedavas is giving us, in 3 sentences, the gist of all of philosophy. All of higher spirituality is right there in that quote. You see how beautiful. Because he lets us in the fact that this endless stream of phenomena is caused by the mind. And the mind is a part of nature, isn't it? Brain is certainly a part of nature, but mind still partakes of form. Wherever you find form, you find nature. You even find nature in a formless sense in the bulk of the iceberg, where the dinosaurs went and where they'll come back from again, where Elvis went and where he comes back from again, unless he's already come back, where Jesus went after he was resurrected and comes back again. You see, they all go back into unmanifested prakriti, and they come back again into manifested prakriti. Where your baby comes from and where your great-grandfather went to, that's the trade-off of form and formlessness all the time, and those are the cycles that concern the saints and the seers. They're concerned about those for you. That you get lost in them and never find your way out for hundreds of lifetimes. If you did that in bliss and glee, they'd leave you there happily. Like children playing in sandboxes. But you don't. You suffer there, you see. And you suffer necessary things, yes, like they all do who come into form, but you also suffer too many unnecessary things. And then that gives rise to all this unnecessary violence and conflict. And man becomes not mankind, but man unkind, as you say. See? And then life is a caricature of itself. What to speak of divine life, or even dharmic life, or even moral and ethical life, all of those are thrown to the winds, you see. And all we have is this life of suffering, of violence, of conflict, of confusion. And that's no life at all. That's Maya. The queen of all four-letter words. And now we're in trouble, you see. So these 3 or 4 things that Vedavyas says in this first quote, just jot it down and memorize it. And remember that from day to day. Beautiful. And he says this and mentions the word Kaivalya. And then Vedavyas fleshes it out for us. Here are the steps. We don't really need to go too far into the Sanskrit of it, but we can just use the English. The very first is getting a wisdom transmission. He says, one whose buddhi, intelligence, is filled with the discriminating wisdom that springs from constantly trying to perceive the self, possesses the highest dispassion. So now it's his turn to borrow from Vedanta, you see. Now Vedavyas borrowed from yoga. Now yoga gives back to Vedanta, you see, because detachment and dispassion are the 2 pillars of Vedanta, really. Viveka, Vairagya, there they are. Viveka here, Vairagya here, right at her crest jewel. The 2 crest jewels, Viveka, Vairagya. Discrimination between the real and the unreal, and detachment from the unreal. Once you know what's real, you've separated the wheat from the chaff, then separate them out. Separate them out. We could do the same experience, you see, and call it lack of discrimination and discrimination. You must separate the wheat from the chaff, the real from the unreal. And once you find the real, detach from the unreal. It's a 2-punch fight. 1-2 punch that puts ignorance to the mat forever. That's Vedanta's way of proceeding. So here he says, trying to perceive the spiritual self possessed of the highest dispassion. Dispassion means detachment. You get dispassion for things, and your passion goes towards realization of God. So this is the first step in that. Now, this happens after the 8 limbs have already been mostly good, you see. You've done your yamas and your niyamas. You've done your asana and your pranayama. You've done your pratyahara and your dharana. And now you're getting to meditation, dhyan, and samadhi. So the first 6 limbs have pretty much been accomplished. And you're at that level of concern called dhyan yoga, meditation. And meditation is really wrapped up with its success in reaching the formless reality. All wisdom, worldly wisdom, lasts for only a little while, Vivekananda says. But spiritual wisdom lasts and satisfies forever. So you get this dharma, you get these teachings, and you take them to the utmost. take them to the deepest point you can take them with that deep dive we were talking about, and then you start on this trip to Kaivalya. So these are 7 steps that happen at a very high level. You don't get a wisdom transmission just walking down the street every day in a state of ignorance. You're going to have to find a teacher, get a mantra, set your foot on the path, start dealing with your karmas, your samskaras, look into yourself, remake yourself, cut yourself in the image of the Spirit, however you talk about it. And then just when you thought you really had it together, you reach something like this. Oh, I see, I can't really pass it, the portals of form and into the ocean of formlessness until I separate myself out from my desire for form. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a desire for form until they told me for it, because I didn't know there was anything such thing as a formless self. So that's what it says. Try to perceive the spiritual self. Then you'll know that there is such a thing as a formless nature. And it's going to be a formlessness with a uppercase F, right? Now, get the wisdom transmission. Remember, all of these 7 steps are in the attempt to try and get yourself beyond nature. Those kinds of things are not just the 5 elements that you see outside of yourself, but they're also thoughts in your mind. You have the thought of earth, you have the thought of water, you have the thought of fire. And those light up your dream state. You understand, right? You breathe in a dream state, and you fly in a dream state, so there must be air there, and you walk on different lands, so there must be earth there. You have these same 5 elements inside your head, and that's precisely why everything has come from the mind, marched outward and solidified itself here. And tonight you're just taking it back to its more subtle components. And your senses are the same. You see and taste and touch and hear in a dream too, just like you do out here. So these are all connected. There are 20 of them that are connected. 5 elements, 5 subtle elements, 5 senses, and 5 subtle senses, right? You have 20 there. And then a 4-fold mind. That's the famous 4-fold 24 cosmic principles, a simile of that. So remember then, I'm saying all of these 7 steps are taking place inside of that one bid to get into formlessness. You already reached a very high state of your awareness, and you finally are set and ready to get a wisdom transmission. See, people take teachings and they go away, see, and they come back and take them again, and they go away, and they come back and take them again, but they haven't done any preparation of their consciousness to receive those teachings yet. What do you think the teachings are going to do when they get into an impure mind? Probably drive some people crazy, you see. So you qualify yourself, make yourself a ready and fit receptacle, then you go and take the transmission, and the whole thing is over in a matter of days, weeks, or years. You've got the idea, you're on the path. You've been launched. Your ship has been launched and you can sail. So qualification is a very important thing, so I'm saying that's what's happened already to this person who's seeking Kaivalya. Now the second step is khyati. Discernment and clarity comes to you. Patanjali says, the highest type of dispassion is clarity of knowledge, called prasad. Funny, we all thought prasad was sanctified food. Now we find that there's a sanctified food for the mind too. When it arises, khyati rises with it, and the yogi eliminates suffering, attains everything, and snaps the chain of rebirth. Here's what he's looking for. Oh, snapper of this life's chains, you see, as a song they sing to Sri Ramakrishna. Whenever the avatar comes, he will give you those teachings which snap the chain of rebirth with all its links. The Buddhists call it nidanas, all the links that are routing you back into samsara, based upon 3 lifetime scenario, according to the Buddhists. A life to develop the karma, a life to realize that you have it, and a life to get rid of it, basically. So that's the way some Buddhist schools would describe it, called the nidanas. One of the 3 or 4 main Buddhist precepts. Praticca samutpata, the interdependence of all things, and the 4-fold truths and the Eightfold Noble Path and the Nidanas. These are some of the main basic Buddhist precepts that you learn that go hand in hand with Vedanta and yoga. Father of Yoga was supposed to have been very influenced by Buddha, and you can see some of those teachings in his Eight-Limbed Yoga. So get Khyati, wisdom transmission and Khyati. Then Dharma Mega Samadhi happens. That's a very beautiful state. You see it in certain souls. It's called the rain cloud of virtues. If you were a person that was a candidate for Dharma Mega Samadhi and you'd actually start to attain it, then you would all of a sudden give up looking for all those things outside of you, all those virtues, and they would all of a sudden naturally arise in you. A good voice, understanding of the scriptures, a clear complexion, a healthy body, on all levels, physical, mental, psychological, philosophical, the rain cloud of virtues falls inside of you. Dharma Mega Samadhi. It's a kind of samadhi all its own, and it's beginning to qualify you for your divorce from nature. You're going to the high court, you see, and the judge there is going to want to know that you've had Dharma Mega Samadhi so you can put your divorce through, you see. Now, Malavinasha, some of these will surprise you because you'll realize how deep ignorance is in the soul. It's called Mula Vidya. Mula Vidya means root ignorance. It means that the soul, the idea of an individual soul is really formed in ignorance. There is no such thing as an individual soul. There's only one soul. It's homogeneous. It's all-pervasive. It's birthless, deathless, as we've said. It's full of wisdom. It has Dharma Mega Samadhi in it. Everything is in it. And you're still laboring under the idea that you're a part of it or a spark from it, a spark from the fire. That's qualified non-dualism. We'll give it to you. It's a station. But you haven't yet come upon the marvels of non-duality yet, like Vivekananda realized. See, there all of a sudden I and my Father are one. Tat Tvamasi, that thou art. You have these startling realizations of the oneness, or put it more like not two-ness of reality, because you can't limit it to oneness. So we're talking about, when we get into these next ones, you'll be surprised. Mala Vinasha and Guna Vaitrishnam, that the Mala imperfections and their destruction, Vinasha, and the Gunas, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, are very deep in you, and when you transcend your desire for form in nature, that's when you will get rid of your imperfections and the gunas, not until. That's why the Swami who took the name Swami Trigunatitananda, one of the direct disciples, 16 direct disciples of Ramakrishna, was very astute in his name selecting. So I think I'll name myself the bliss of transcending the three gunas. So he already puts himself right there on the map, you see. And he's only got 3 or 4 more steps to get to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, you see, formless Samadhi. He knows that the gunas are one of the last things to go because they were one of the first things to come, you see. When the gunas were in equilibrium, everything was fine. But as soon as they were thrown into disequilibrium, everything started spilling out and vibrating. It's one of the ancient teachings of the gunas, particular to Vedanta. All the way down to this mind, how it goes through slothfulness, restlessness, and balance every day, all the time, probably every minute. And you'll only know that if you watch it in meditation. Otherwise, you'll just feel it and you'll say, oh, I was in a bad mood last couple hours ago. I'm fine now. So I was restless for a while. Now I'm really lazy. But so you call it a mood, but they call it a mode of nature. And it's not your fault. It's not something that necessarily you're inviting unto yourself. It's something that happens to every mind. Why do you think they experience the dark night of the soul? See, if there isn't the gunas in them still. See? But they've learned marvelously how to detach from them. See, isn't these first 2 steps all about detachment and dispassion? So they've realized that. We still identify ourselves with the gunas when they happen to us. Oh, I'm depressed. I think I'll get more depressed. Oh, I'm restless. I think I'll just keep being restless, you see. I'll spin my wheels more. Like the dog sees the car coming at, instead of running away from it, runs towards it. Oh, I think I'll run toward that moving object. See? Stupidity. So, this ignorance that attends us at a very root level is going to be something we need to X out of the equation, and that's only going to happen when we can transcend form. Form it's available to form. Ignorance is available to form the minute it takes its inception. We have to realize that about forms, all forms, even the forms of the gods. We don't want to go there, see. We want beyond the gods and goddesses, because the Atman is formless, and that's our true nature. The gods are fixed in their positions for hundreds and thousands of years, maybe ages. They can't get out of that particular form. We're lucky. We only have to spend 80 years in a form. See, have you become so ingratiated to your own form that you want to stay here all the time? Or is there a part of you that's saying, like Vivekananda, oh, it might be very true that I'll feel very free as soon as I drop this body. Do you have that feeling in you? If you have that feeling, then you have spirituality developed somewhere inside of you. But if you're clinging to the body, that's called abhinivesha. And according to the father of yoga, that's the fifth and lowest of all hells that the soul can fall into, called fear of death. The fifth and lowest hell you can fall into. Where Shankara himself is singing, Namrityur na Shanka name jati beda. I have no birth, I have no death, I'm free, you see. So I'm preparing you for the next two steps here. Mali Vinasha and Guna Vaitrishnam, you'll take them in one gulp. Destruction of blemishes. He says, luminosity is the self-nature of sattvic buddhi. With impurity removed from it, its flow is pure and proficient, unsubjugated by the presence of rajas and tamas. So, already mentioning the three gunas there in the ridding yourself of malas. Now, the tantric look at malas are that mala means imperfection. We're not talking about the mala beads that you're wearing around your neck or using for mantra practice. Mala in Tantra, that Sanskrit word means imperfection. So the idea in Tantra is that the soul is born with these imperfections. That is, the mind, anything that's born is born with these imperfections. The Atman is never born, so it doesn't have these. Let's just make sure we remember that. But anything that's born or takes on a form is invested with these malas right out the gate, you see. And the gunas would be three of them, always vying for supremacy. Sometimes I'm restless, sometimes I'm tired, sometimes I'm balanced. Always going around in cycles till the soul gets world weary, see, hopefully, and just doesn't put up with them forever. So these three gunas are there, and mala vinasha means to destroy them, destroy your dependence upon them, because based on the fact that when you get Kaivalya, freedom from nature, you will get into a state of asampragata samadhi, that the sun is shining on that word right now, you see. Coming in from our Hawaiian sun, is shining on asampragata samadhi. Perfect, you see. So you will get into that state of seedless samadhi when you get rid of these seeds, these sort of mixed pure, impure seeds of gunas. And let's look what the next one details that further. Dispassion toward the gunas, guna vaitrishyam. Freedom dawns when the craving for the gunas and the attributes of nature ends, based on realization of the spiritual self, the Purusha. That's that. Another word for Atman. So there's a craving for these gunas. There's a craving for nature that the soul has, and it has a hard time satisfying it. It wants to come back, zest for life, thirst for life. You know what Vivekananda said about it in his poem, this thirst for life forever quench. It drags from birth to death, and death to birth to soul. Just one sentence out of his poem, Sangha Sannyasa. This thirst for life forever quench, for it drags from birth to death, and death to birth to soul. A soul that's in a transmigratory process, not the Atman that's standing back as the witness, watching a simile of itself, a semblance of itself, going from birth to death and death to birth, and saying to it all the time, why are you doing that, fool? Why don't you come and inhabit the highest limb of yoga with me. Like a bird with beautiful plumage. We'll be two birds on the same tree in the highest limb of yoga together. No more birth and death for me in the womb of matter. Only emanation from my Divine Mother. That's how Ramprasad puts it. So put Vivekananda's saying next to Ramprasad's. This thirst for life forever quench. It drags from birth to death and death to birth to soul. No more birth for me in the womb of matter. Only emanation from my Divine Mother. See? So one has the monastic view, get done with the whole shooting match. The other has the, if I come back at all, it's going to be as a wisdom ray from the Mother herself, on her auspice. So, malas, imperfections, and gunas, this is where you will get over them. Get over it, my teacher used to say. Oh, I haven't been feeling very well today, Swami. Get over it, he'd say. Right now, you have my permission. You see, you don't need to stay there any longer with these gunas playing with you, or you playing with the gunas, you see. Just be yourself every day, every moment. Be in yoga. Why not? So that's step 4 and 5. Step 6 and 7 are more toward the essence of the thing, jnana prasad. Now, he mentioned that earlier, right? That there was a prasad that happens when khyati happens. That is, clarity happens when this wisdom is taken and you get real clear on the matter. It's like, if thine eye be single, you should know the truth kind of clarity. So now he's saying, let's call the 7th step, the 6th step, arrival at Jnana Prasad. Now you have it. Destruction of karma and other obstacles is what you can do with it. He says, when knowledge is at its purest, even the subtlest impediments like karma from previous births get obliterated. This is the culmination of perfection and ushers in an end to even the thought of form. Remember that problem you were having back here when you were meditating on Om? How you couldn't get away from the thoughts of form and objects and so forth? Well, here, Adamsi is letting you know this is the end of that problem for you. You can now put it to rest, put it to bed, tuck it in, leave it, turn off the light, go away, never come back. You see, leave it on its own auspice. Turn the gunas to the gunas from which they sprang. Return nature to form from which it sprang, and go to your own formless nature. Ushers in an end to even the thought of form. So now you've got what Vedanta calls samadhana, the ability to meditate on God and only God with no other distractions. The seers are marvelous like that. When it's time for meditation, they can shut down the books, the duties, the running of the ashram, the running of the monastery with its hundreds and hundreds of monks. Because our teacher, whose picture is on the ashram there, our teacher's teacher, did that. Shut all that off, and all the details of the day, and all the worries, and all the problems that people are coming to him with in his daily interviews and so forth, and he can just sit down in meditation and think of Brahman alone. All the rest of that's unreal. Only this is real. That's called samadhana. It's the 5th of 6 jewels in Vedanta. And those 6 jewels lie inside the 4 treasures, which are, 2 of them are Viveka and Vairagya. It's a beautiful system. We'll look at that. It's called here Shatsampat. Shatsampat is the 6 jewels. We'll look at that, the base of that pillar, next week or the week after. Stay tuned, because then you will have had a 7, maybe longer, week discourse on Divine Mother's internal peripheries, her atmospheres. Now, what else is in that quote? Karmas from previous births get obliterated. So this tells us that not only the roots of our imperfections and these gunas, which are at the inception of all form, are there at the very end of our road, but also the karmas from past lifetimes tend to hang on for a long time. People are surprised. I was surprised to find this out in the teachings. I was wondering, I thought maybe those things expired long before you got samadhi. But I understood by studying these darshanas, the Astika darshanas and the Nastika darshanas, that these things persist for a very long time. Sri Ramakrishna's teaching about burnt rope is great. People would come to him and say, I don't have that problem anymore, but I still think about that problem. See, so that's kind of what we're talking about here, subtle bondage. I don't really have that problem anymore, but I still think about it. That's, Ramakrishna would tell them, don't worry about that. A puff of wind will blow that away soon enough. What he's talking about is a burnt rope. It looks like a rope still, but it can't bind you anymore. In fact, if you go, the whole thing will fall apart before your very eyes. So you have this memory inside of yourself of deeds done, good, bad, and mixed. Those are basically setting up all your karmas, past, present, and future. I mean, you could probably make a case for connecting these up with the A, U, and M of Om too, you see, somewhere in the whole picture. So if you're talking about past, present, and future karmas, Patanjali comes along and said, these past ones may persist for a while. They may persist, Ramakrishna says, as burnt strings or burnt ropes. You'll be aware of them still, but at some point the whiff of non-duality, the wind of non-duality will come along and just a mere puff will destroy them and you'll be free of them. And you'll be able to think about God and nothing else but God. So help you, God. And this is the beauty of the food of wisdom, jnana prasada, what you get fed at that level of spiritual understanding. And all you need to do is immerse yourself in it. Like we said this morning in satsang, my mind is a towel. Ramakrishna says, just dip that towel in the ocean over and over and over again until it's completely saturated. Don't even worry if I'm understanding it or not. Just saturate yourself in the ocean of wisdom. Wring it out later, you see. But just make sure that every day you saturate your mind in these teachings. There's a lot of debate going on between atheists and believers, between scientists and religionists. You might have seen them on the YouTubes and so forth. It's really all interesting, but it's really kind of futile. All you really need to do is put your mind on the teachings. You don't have to believe in God or not believe in God. Of these Astika darshanas, of which are 6, probably at least 2 of them, these are traditional, means Astika means traditional, yoga, Vedanta, Samkhya. Well, and then Nastika means Buddhism and Jainism and so forth. Of all of those darshanas, probably half of them don't necessarily recommend, or not recommend, don't mean that it's an absolute necessity for you to believe in God. You don't need to believe in God to practice these darshanas. You don't need to be a believer. Yoga, Patanjali hardly mentions God in all the sutras. I think once he mentions Ishvara. Kapila in his Samkhya philosophy never mentions it. Buddha never mentions it. See, so it's not like you have to be some believer or be saved from something, from some devil because you don't believe. That's silliness, you see. All you need to do is put your mind in the teachings. Debate isn't necessary, disagreement isn't necessary, winning isn't necessary, losing isn't a problem. You just put your mind in the teachings for a long, long, long time. And all those problems go away. This is the transmission of wisdom you start with that turns into jnana prasada. Actual possession of wisdom. Whereas you were getting it transmitted from some other source before, right? Now it's yours. Sri Ramakrishna said, and I chanted at the beginning of this class a sloka that's sort of like it, some people have never heard of milk, and some people have heard of it, but some people have tasted it. So those people who've never heard of milk have never heard of Brahman or God, you see. And those who have heard of it, they neither believe nor disbelieve yet, But those who have tasted it, they know. But then there's those who own a dairy. See? They can hand it out in droves, in gallons, in quarts, in gallons, in flows. The milk of the Gita can flow to the young calves of the spiritual aspirants. That's in the Gita Jnanam. You can read about it, the beginning of the Gita. So that point is only to illustrate that once wisdom is yours, you realize you're on the brink of realizing Kaivalya. Kaivalya then would be, there it is, a sampragyata. That's here, you see, and that will segue me next week into talking about sampragyata and asampragyata, and we'll also take up moksha, freedom, eternal freedom, not a freedom that's gained over time. So there you see, asampragyata is the 7-step attainment of non-dual samadhi. So this is how this masterful father of yoga, we know already that he's systematized the yoga and put it into 8 limbs for us and discoursed on all 8 limbs and every facet of all 8 limbs in a most marvelous way. There's probably no more complex and deep and profound system of philosophy than yoga. Maybe Tantra, but Tantra was never systematized. At least Patanjali came along and systematized yoga. At the same time we say that, we can say that if you just look at one aspect of the limb of yoga, you'll find this word Kaivalya and a whole set of steps that have to be followed in it. You see, the spiritual life is the razor's edge, right? It's the razor's edge path. You can't deviate from it. You have to follow it to the T. My teacher would actually shout at us in the ashram, follow the tradition. If he thought we were getting off the tradition in any little way, he would get us back on the razor's edge path. Follow the tradition. He'd shout it out loud, many times a day if necessary. So he wanted to make sure we stuck with it. Stick-to-itiveness, they call it, you see. Because the problem is this wavering consciousness, that chanchala vritti, this mind that wavers and stays for a little bit, straw on fire, burns out, and then goes off to some other direction, you see. So it never gets very deep into anything. It's not that we want you to be just Vedantists or just yogis or just tantrasists or just Indian, you see, Indian philosophy. Whatever religion you're in, stick to it and go deep in it. Don't stick to it and stay shallow. So I would say that if you're in yoga and Vedanta, there's no way you can be shallow because you're not starting at Vedanta 101 or Yoga 101. You're already deep when you take up any of these teachings in the Mother Path. You're already deep. And it's not a deep that means I believe or I don't believe, or I have faith or I don't have faith. It's just like, oh my God, see, or in this case, oh my goddess. See, look how much is in you. There's a song in India they sing about her. It says, Mother doesn't even know the extent of her own wisdom. So vast it is. See? She doesn't even know the extent of her own wisdom. It's just vast and spontaneous, bubbling up like a spring of ambrosia. All the time, fresh, new, taking on ever fresh permutations, you see, working its way down. Vivekananda said, I can equate truth to the most corrosive substance in the world. It will burn through everything. But it burns through solid substances, it'll take longer. So when it comes down to this earth, which is the most solid substance you can get, vibrationally speaking, it's going to take some time to work itself into our minds. But teachings like this will help it work in. And if necessary, we'll push it in. Holy Mother said, some people go to the cold pool for their morning bath and they stick their toe in. See? They stick 2 toes in and half their foot. You see? They get used to the water that way. Another person just goes and dives in, gets it all done at once. Another person is standing there wondering what to do, and somebody comes behind him and pushes him in. You see? So if whatever it takes, we'll push you in if necessary to get you wet. Because the dryness of intellectual, secular knowledge alone is not doing it. nor is the over sentimental bhakti, you see, the conventional religious wisdom doing it either. You see the faith-based traditions that are just talking about praying once a day at meals and going to church once a week. That's not doing it. It's not religion with a capital R. It's religion with a small r, or conventional religion. But true religion with a capital R, Vivekananda said, I want to bring that back. And I want to make it digestible so that even a baby can take it. And he describes it as Raja Yoga, this yoga here that Patanjali has. The yoga of action, how to do work selflessly. The yoga of meditation, which will get you into a non-dual samadhi. And the yoga of wisdom, which is what we are engaged in right now. This is mainly the Jnana Yoga. Jnana Prasada is what you're getting. Wisdom transmission. So they know this is the best way to get rid of ignorance, which is why Vivekananda brought Vedanta to the West. He looked at all the Astika systems, he looked at all the Nastika systems, and he said, I'm going to the West. What is the best thing to bring these people? He said, if I were to color them, I'd color them pink. They're not black, they're not tamasic. My country's a bit black right now. And they're not brown, combination. And they're not just pure red, rajas. They're not just restless. They're pink. They're a combination of red and white. So they're starting to lean towards balance, towards sattva. But they have a lot of frenetic activity mixed in with them. So what should I bring a culture like that? And he said, the Vedanta is what they need. Especially the Advaita Vedanta. We should bring them that. And Advaita Vedanta will be the future religion of the world. There is no doubt about it. That's what he prophesied. So when you're qualifying yourself for non-dual wisdom, which is at the foundation of Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, Samkhya Yoga, Patanjali's Yoga, Vedanta, and other Nyaya and Visheshika, all the various Astika and Nastika systems, which we will look into. In this chart that I'm going to show you eventually, which is a new chart, all these different darshana systems will probably get you next week. Then you'll see that this was a great choice to bring us the Vedanta based in Advaita Vedanta. So we are studying the Shakta Advaita Vada path, which is a beautiful combination of his master's teaching, Shaktism, that he was a lover of Mother Kali, and an amalgam, an equal mixture of the Vedanta of the seers, the non-dual Vedanta of the great knowers of truth. So I hope that you are dipping the towel of your mind and drenching it in these teachings that are flowing at SRV ashrams for this last 3 weeks, and for the next 4 Sundays coming at least. We may even extend it longer because there's a lot to cover in her. Not that we'll ever reach the end of it. So at that point, I think, instead of, with only 10 minutes remaining, going into another chart, we will take up what's called moksha later, next week, and look into these Ashtaka and Nashtaka darshanas, which is a chart that none of you have seen yet. We will do that in accordance with this pillar, moksha, and with this whole nirguna side, all the way down to Ashtaka and Nashtaka, these systems of philosophy. And what's going to attend upon them is called pramana, the various ways you prove these systems. You prove the existence of God. Very, very wonderful, because many people say, prove it, prove it. And there is no proof for God. There is no proof for independent consciousness separate from nature. And we say, I beg to differ. There are at least 6 proofs in Vedanta which you can look at, and 2 in the Puranas, and some 6 in the Vaisheshika philosophy. So each of these philosophies have different ways of proof, which are very interesting to look into. They're not dry, as sometimes they're reputed to be. If they're presented in the right way, they'll be very illuminating for you and elucidate the subject very well. So those are the things we have to look forward to in next week and the next couple of weeks' classes. I hope you're all here, and I invite you to come and invite your friends, and live streaming too. We thank you for coming, and say Namaste and Aloha to you, and let's end then with a Sanskrit chant today. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamoya Mrityurma Amritam Gamoya Abira Bira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from the unreal to the real. And lead us from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.
Prasidamatar Nagendra Nandini Chirsukadayini Jayate Ma.
Salutations to the Divine Mother, who is the supreme power filled with wonder, and who manifests as Sri Durga, the 10-armed goddess of protection. May the Mother of everlasting peace, who is full of the enjoyment of the universe, become pleased with all of us and bestow upon us her eternal blessings.
Anantarupini Ananta Gunavati Ananta Namne Girijema. Anantarupini Ananta Gunavati Ananta Namne Girijema. Shiva Hrinmohini Vishvavilashini Ramakrishna Jaya Daini Ma. Shiva Hrinmohini Vishvavilashini Ramakrishna